Hello, Anna McHugh is my name. I'm Head of Communications here at An Post in the General Post Office in Dublin City, and you're so welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. I've had the joy of working in this building for more than 2 decades, and it is one of the Irish state's most symbolic and most important buildings. Today it is the headquarters of An Post, the Irish Postal Service, and it's had a very rich and regal history over more than 200 years. So this building was originally opened in 1818, and then under British rule, Postmaster General was in charge of the building and in charge of the rapidly developing postal service within Ireland. Those were the days of mail coaches and highway robberies. But the GPO itself, as I said, was opened in 1818 to great fanfare, and it was by far the most important building on O'Connell Street. And interestingly, it was refurbished. A big job had been done on it in the early years, the early 1900s, just ahead of the 1916 Rising, which was such an important part of Ireland's step forward for independence and independent rule. Unfortunately, the building, which had been originally designed by Francis Johnson, who designed so many other buildings in Ireland and across Britain, the building was destroyed in the 1916 Rising, all but the portico at the front and the beautiful colonnades and pillars, which are very ornate at the front of the building. So they remained in place, but the rest of the building was absolutely destroyed because it had been shelled from a gunboat that came down the River Liffey to end the 1916 insurrection that took place over Easter week that year. So the building then lay in ruins for a number of years until it was rebuilt in the 1920s and reopened in 1929. You'll see on the roof of the building 3 very important statues. Mercury, the messenger of the gods, representing the international communications. Hibernia, representing Ireland, and a statue of Fidelity with her faithful hound beside her, representing the postal service and the trust that people put in their postal service. Going back briefly to the 1916 Rising, the reason this building was chosen for that insurrection was because it was the communications heart of the city. It was where the telephone exchange was, it's where telegrams were dispatched from, and of course where postal services were provided. So it was a very symbolic building, and it had the space for the rebels at the time to occupy. We like to call it still the sitting room of the nation, and we love to invite people in to enjoy the splendour of the building, both outside and also here in the public post office hall, where, as you can see, there is beautiful ornate work. It's the original 1929 ceilings, light fittings, the counters, the beautiful brass counters still used today, and 3 beautiful writing desks that are original 1929 desks, the hexagonal one in the middle and 2 longer ones either side, that people to this very day write their envelopes, pack up their parcels on, and do their post office business. The floor is an actual replica of the original 1929 floor, and what's very important is the statue of Cuchulainn, which was designed by Oliver Shepherd and commemorates the brave men, and they were all men, of the signatories of the proclamation proclaiming the Irish Republic as part of the 1916 Rising. And you'll hear more about that when we move shortly into the GPO Museum. So the building is very significant as it stands in the middle of O'Connell Street, right in the centre of Dublin City. As I said, we love to welcome people in, and we have groups and people coming through all the time. People doing their daily business, their banking, their post, foreign currency, whatever it might be, and of course buying Irish stamps. And also lots of visitors and tourists to the city. We host lots of cultural events, launches, theatre, poetry and music here. It's a very special place in which to perform, and I suppose a great honour for those artists who get that opportunity. But it's very important to us that everyone feels welcome here. Our diaspora, people who are new to Dublin, people who have Irish roots or no Irish roots, that they're very welcome here. They take the time to enjoy the building, send a postcard, and just feel the sense of history that is very evident in the public areas of this building.
Welcome to the GPO Museum. My name is Aline FitzGerald. I'm the General Manager here. We're going to take you now on a journey just through the museum so you can see a little of what we have to offer.
At the start of the 20th century, there were two main political ideologies on the island of Ireland. First of all, we have our Unionists, who would have made up about 1/4 of the population on the island of Ireland. The majority of Unionists would have been in the northeastern part of the country and believed that Ireland should remain part of the Union with Great Britain. This union was the Act of Union 1800. The dominant political ideology on the island of Ireland, however, were Irish nationalists or home rulers. They were called home rulers because they wanted self-government or home rule for Ireland. The Irish Parliament was closed down with this Act of Union in 1800. They did not believe in violence for their campaigns. They believed in peaceful political process, something that they were fervent for. Charles Stewart Parnell is the main nationalist figure that we think of in the 19th century. So there are three groups that are responsible for bringing about the irreparable change at the start of the 20th century and the 1916 Easter Rising. At the heart of it all are our Republicans. With gun in hand, they want a free, independent Irish Republic that has nothing to do with the British Empire. They're prepared to use violence to achieve their means, but they're a very small group. And there's a secret organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, which are responsible for a lot of the action that takes place during the 1916 Rising. The IRB are very clever with what they do. They pull in two other groups, our suffragettes, the women's movement, and our socialists, the social workers movement from the start of the 20th century. At the time, women did not have the vote, but by the 1918 general election and by the aftermath of the 1916 Rising, things have irreparably changed. Women over the age of 30 have the vote in Ireland and the United Kingdom, and a whole new franchise of people are opened up to voting political rights. And with this spurs a change and a greater push for Irish independence in the aftermath of the Rising. Perhaps the biggest group at the time were the socialist group, or the workers. James Larkin and James Connolly are the two main people that we think of, the two leaders of Irish socialism. The caricature here depicts Jim Larkin, the angry Jim Larkin, Liverpool-born, who was always giving speeches, fervent in his desire to create a better working conditions for the people of Ireland. In 1913, the Dublin lockout was an event which saw thousands of people taken out of their place of work by the employer William Martin Murphy for their complaints over their terms of working conditions. This was a social revolution that never took place, but all of this is happening in Ireland at the same time as wider movements in the United States and particularly in Russia when we think of the 1917 revolution. So as I say, the IRB bring together these two other groups to stage a rebellion for Easter of 1916. 6 weeks before Easter, the General Post Office was closed down for renovation work. The British Exchequer pumped thousands of pounds into renovating the interior of the building. Within the space of 6 days, by the end of Easter week, as you can see, the building was left entirely in ruins. All that was standing was the shell of the building. Irish nationalism gained its momentum from the mid-19th century Gaelic revival. So you can see an example of the type of clothing worn by a traditional Irish Gaelic revivalist in the exhibition case here. The Irish language was part of this movement as well. You can also see this newspaper copy that we have of An Clive Sullis, an Irish language newspaper. Owen McNeill, amongst others, was part of the editing team. It was a way for Irish language enthusiasts to communicate at the start of the 20th century The cancelling notice for the 1916 Easter Rising, when it was originally cancelled, was published in this newspaper. The Irish language is central to all of this movement. The face of the 1916 Rising, Padraig Pearse, you can see his image on the touchscreen here, was an Irish language enthusiast and school teacher. He set up his own Irish language school in Dublin, in Rathfarnham, and he also published this book, Éasagáin agus Scéalta Ella, Stories About Jesus. Written in the Irish language, it is a symbol of what Pearse wanted this rebellion to be about. Irish culture and identity, all enveloped in this one culture. We also have plays and poetry. At the start of the 20th century, the Abbey Theatre is founded in 1904, 1905. You can see a poster from its opening night theatre production. The works of many poets and playwrights have enshrined the legacy of the 1916 Easter Rising in Irish history. The works of Sean O'Casey remember the events of the Rising and the hardship it brought for many ordinary people, but also the sense of optimism that the future might bring out of the poverty that they currently were in.
We tell the story from all sides, from the rebels, the GPO workers who would have been in this building, the bystanders, some of which were children. There were 40 children who lost their lives during the Rising here in the city of Dublin. We also have the Crown forces represented, so really telling the story from all sides.
The rebels held out in the GPO for up to 6 days. By the end of Easter week, the British had encircled Dublin city centre and started to fire incendiary bombs towards the roof. This was the weakest point of the building. You can see by this replica wall that we have here, the walls are 4 feet thick, made of solid Wicklow granite, an impenetrable defensive fortification for the start of the 20th century. However, with the roof caving in, the rebels had to leave towards Henry Street and eventually Moore Street, where they eventually surrendered on Easter weekend, 1 week later, only 6 days.
We use original artifacts to communicate the history, whether that is from a political nature or from somebody's personal aspects. What we seek to do here is to make that accessible to you, our visitors, and help you understand a little more deeply about Irish history. It covers the period of time from the early 1900s with the Cultural Revival, right through to present time when we opened in 2016 for the commemoration of the 1916 Easter Rising.
In this exhibition case, we tell some of the stories of the rebel leaders who were involved in the 1916 Easter Rising. For example, we have a razor belonging to Eamon Ceannt. Eamon Ceannt was born in Galway in 1881, and he was an active member of Cunra na Gaeilge, the Gaelic League. He was an enthusiast of the Irish language, and he was one of the leading commanders in the South Dublin Union during the 1916 Easter Rising. Only days prior to the 1916 Rising, Ceannt handed his razor in to be sharpened in a premises in Dublin city centre, expecting to receive it only a few days later. Ceannt would be one of the 16 rebel leaders executed in the aftermath of the 1916 Rising. Just shows you the personal stories that we have to tell here in the GPO Museum. At the GPO Museum, we are proud sponsors of the Thomas Francis Meagher Flag Foundation. This is the foundation of the tricolour flag of the Republic of Ireland. You can see the flag here behind me. The green of the Irish tricolour flag represents Catholics or nationalists, broadly speaking. Orange represents Protestants and Unionists, and the white represents the peace, or the desired peace, between both communities on the island of Ireland. We are a centre of peace and reconciliation here at the GPO Museum. Thomas Francis Meagher was an Irish Republican who fought in the 1848 rebellion. He was deported to Van Diemen's Land for his involvement in this rebellion by the British Crown in Ireland. He fled from there to the United States of America, where he would go on to take part in the American Civil War for the fighting 69th New York Regiment. After the US Civil War, Thomas Francis Meagher became the first governor of the state of Montana. You can see over my left shoulder Nelson's Pillar. Nelson's Pillar was a tribute to a British Navy commander, Lord Admiral Nelson. Nelson would have taken on Napoleon at the start of the 19th century, most famously at the Battle of Trafalgar. Nelson was a man who was despised by the majority of the Irish nationalist and Catholic population. He was a symbol of British imperialism, and this pillar stood on Sackville Street and later O'Connell Street all the way up until 1966. So a whole 50 years after the 1916 Easter Rising and 44 years after the foundation of the Irish Free State in 1922. Nelson's Pillar was blown up, we believe, by dissident Republicans just before the 50th anniversary of the 1916 Easter Rising's 50th commemoration. What stands there today is the Millennium Spire. It was completed in 2003. The spire is a monument to light and hope and the future. We recently commemorated the 20th anniversary of the erection of the spire in Dublin city centre. In our courtyard, we have a memorial to the 40 children that lost their lives during Easter week of 1916, titled "They Are of Us All." Sculpted by Barbara Gnezovic, it represents each of the children, different sizes for each of them, and the lives they potentially could have lived. At the GPO Museum, we are a centre of peace and reconciliation. You can see our timeline wall brings us from the foundation of both Northern Ireland and the Irish Free State, later the Republic of Ireland, right the way up to the present day. Through this history, we have the violence of the Troubles erupting on the island of Ireland. As a centre of peace and reconciliation, it is very important for us here to have discussions around how we've gotten to this position and how we can maintain and ensure a stable peace on the island of Ireland for all of us to live in harmony together.
I really hope you've enjoyed your brief visit to us here in the GPO. It's been a pleasure to share some of our secrets with you, and we look forward to welcoming you in person.